Byron. Thank you, Ms. Knapp. Good evening, Ponus Ridge Middle School families. I hope you're well. As Mr. Byron alluded to, I have to say it again. I want to reiterate it that this is being recorded. So we ask that you please turn off your cameras so we can upload this presentation later. And we don't want to have things that are going on in the background, as Mr. Byron alluded to. We are entering the 2020-2021 school year in a different place than we've ever been before. We are coming back to school amidst a global pandemic, social unrest, families with and communities with food insecurities, and a host of other things that we are dealing with, while in the same motion trying to do the best to provide each and every one of our families with a safe and equitable learning environment. With that being said, we've consulted tremendously with our central office staff, who've been fantastic about reopening guidelines and things that we have to follow in order to make this a safe reopening for all students and families. Just a broad overview of what we're going to talk about tonight. We're definitely going to talk about how school will be different this year and what it will look like. We'll talk about some of the things that the district and school has put into practice for the health and safety of your students. We'll also talk about how you will learn to understand our schedule at Ponus Ridge Middle School, and also how this is a joint responsibility. Coming back to school amidst a global pandemic is going to be a different strain on a bunch of different relationships, but we are here to make sure that your children are as safe as possible. And that joint responsibility means while at school, we are going to have our students wearing face masks, as well as our students and our staff. But when they go home, please know that those practices have to continue in terms of frequent hand washing, mask wearing when they're outside, and they're socially distancing themselves, and limiting the amount of people that your children and students come in contact with. It is a different time, and this is our new normal. And I know we've heard that over and over again. It's somewhat cliche, but it is what we're dealing with. So we ask that we join as a learning community, a Ponus Ridge learning community, to make sure that we're covering all these bases. We'll also have some responses about who we can contact, who's our health and safety liaison. That's our nurse, Ms. Jennifer Rollinson. And in terms of scheduling, as Mr. Byron introduced himself, Mr. Byron is our master scheduler in the building. That's just an introduction. Again, I'm Dr. Lewis, the principal at Ponus Ridge Middle School. I'm entering my 11th year at Ponus Ridge and my 6th year as a principal. I'm a very, very proud Panther. Hello to all my 7th and 8th grade returning families, and welcome to all my 6th grade families. I know I sent you an email a couple days ago, and I probably flooded your email box, but that's my main mode of communication, and that's how I like to get the word out on things that are happening at 21 Hunters Lane. We're going to cover again a couple things tonight. Other than that introduction, we're going to talk about the teaching and learning environment. We're going to talk about what we're doing to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 and how we're responding to potential cases, and what will happen when if there is a case, how we contact trace, and the things that we've put in place as a building to make sure that kids are safe and learning the best they possibly can. If you can see the screen that's being shared by our Dean of Students, Ms. Knapp, we're going to talk about those things. We'll talk about our building structure, our breakfast and lunch, our classes. To our 6th grade families, Jefferson will be occupying our new STEAM building. So we want to make sure we cover all those bases, while also talking about our learning environment, as I alluded to, how we're responding to potential cases, and how we're mitigating the spread of COVID-19 in our building at 21 Hunters Lane. Ms. Knapp, can you go to the next slide? It is going to be a must. Again, I talked about this joint responsibility. It's going to be a must that all students and staff wear a mask. That is what we call at Ponus Ridge a non-negotiable. Students and staff members will have to wear a mask throughout the day. We will have emergency masks available in the main office, in the nurse's office, for students or staff that may need them. We'll also have mask breaks as well, and hand washing or hand sanitizer for our students and staff as well. As I've taught, we will physically distance in our classrooms the best we possibly can to the largest extent possible. And we will have daily screeners That daily screener is yet to be determined, whether it's going to be done electronically or done the old paper pencil form. But students and families will have to fill out a daily screener, okay, to make sure that your son or daughter, whoever the student you are sending to school, is safe to enter our building with other students and other faculty. Okay. One thing that we are definitely doing, Ms. Knapp, if you can stay on this slide for me. One thing that we're doing with our teaching and learning environment at Ponus Ridge is we are reducing our capacity in the building by 50%. So half of our students will be in the building while the other half will be home learning remotely. That's our hybrid model. That's another way that we're reducing what teaching and learning will look like, using the hybrid model in our building. Again, masks will be worn and we will practice social distancing. We will be having, when we do have breakfast and lunch, they will be coming out of sealed containers, okay? Sealed meals that our students will eat in the building, okay? That's what our teaching and learning environment will look like in the building, with a few other iterations. We'll get to schedule a little bit later. But again, you all received the survey about the option that you'd like to choose, whether the hybrid model, or the total remote learning. The hybrid model is something where students will come to school some of the time and stay at home and learn remotely some of the other time. Okay, and we'll go into that a little bit later when we have time for questions. Some ways at Ponus that we are hoping to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. As I said, we will use daily screeners. Students, when they go on their bus stop, they'll have a mask on. When they get off the bus and before they enter the building, they will present staff with a daily screener, whether electronically or again in the physical, the paper form. We will have cleaning stations and hand sanitizer available. Our custodians will really clean those high touch areas, those high touch points, as well as our restrooms will be cleaned. Our restrooms will be cleaned, minimally 2 times a day, okay? 2 times a day we're looking at a minimum. And the custodians will be asked to log when they clean the restrooms and the second time they clean the restrooms as well. We may ask for them to clean them more, but minimally custodians will clean twice a day in our restrooms, okay? Thank you, Ms. Knapp, for going. We talked about the cleaning of the high touch points. We talked about the cleaning of the bathroom. The health and safety, again, is our #1 priority. And one of our charges is if we do have a potential case in our building, if an individual shows any kind of symptoms, we do have an isolation room. That isolation room is separate from our regular nurse's office. It's a totally different room, yet it's fully equipped with all the PPE that the nurse has in her office as well. So if there is a case, we do have a plan. Students or staff will go to the isolation room, and then we'll take our next steps from there. As soon as those symptoms are shown, those symptoms could be shown on the screener. The student may say, I didn't feel well this morning, my temperature was high, and that student, once they show those symptoms, we do have a separate isolation room to keep them away from other students and staff members. A note to current 7th grade families. All students that are going into 7th grade, you must have an updated physical prior to the opening of school. That is another non-negotiable, just like mask wearing. You must have a physical prior to the opening of school. That's all students that are entering 7th grade. If you do not have a physical, now this is very, very important. If you do not have a physical, you are not allowed to engage in any face-to-face learning or any distance learning. Okay, it's good practice and good public health policy. All right, our students have to make sure that they are A-OK, especially as you enter 7th grade, to enter into our building. Again, I'm going to repeat that. Some families may say, well, if my child doesn't have their physical and they're learning at home, why do they need the physical? Again, it's good public health policy. Your child may decide they want to come back to school in a hybrid model, right? And they still have to have their physical. So please, if you're a 7th grade parent and your student does not have their physical yet, please, I implore you, to please make sure you make an appointment as soon as possible if you haven't already, to make sure that your child has a physical, because if they do not have a physical, they will be denied access to the building and access to any type of remote learning. I have sent a couple of emails home this summer to 7th grade families in particular. I know the nurse sent 2 or 3 correspondences home as well. So please make sure that we're following those guidelines to make sure everyone is safe, and we're also keeping everyone else safe in our building. Okay, very, very important. Ms. Knapp, can I have the next slide? Thank you. Just get to a couple of things about Ponus specifically. Our school day starts at 8 o'clock and we're going to end at 2:35. You will receive a bus schedule. We'll go on the website towards the end of this month where and what time your student will be picked up for the bus. It's important while your child is on the bus stop that they are wearing a face mask to A, keep themselves safe, and B, keep everyone else safe around them. It's very, very important. And as your student gets on the bus, it's very important to let them know, and we'll let them know in school as well, that as they enter the bus, they have to start going to the back of the bus first. So if I'm the first student on the bus, I go all the way to the back of the bus and I take that seat. And as students come in, they skip a seat, they alternate a seat, so they're not close to one another, they're wearing their masks, and they're socially distanced. Again, remember, we're operating at 50% capacity. So right now, Ponus has about 665 students on our log. Potentially half of those students will be home, and half, will be in school with our hybrid model. So please make sure if your student is coming to school that they A, have their face mask on the bus stop, and B, they're loading the bus from the back to the front. When the bus does come to Ponus, and we have 8 type 1 or 8 large buses and 2 type 2 or smaller buses, please make sure when they get off the bus, and the drivers I'm sure will go over this as well, that we unload the bus from the front to the back. So the student that got on the bus first will be the last student getting off of the bus. Okay, that's very, very, very important. Okay, for some of our 6th grade families, we have definitely a pickup in the drop-off section of our building. If you can see the screen, if you pull into Ponus at any given time, we are under construction now, but the driveways are clear. You can pull into Ponus, and as you come down the driveway, anytime that you're going to pick your student up after school, you pull into that first driveway, the driveway that's closest to the front field, and you go all the way up, and you pull all the way as far as you can until you're getting all the way, to Hunter's Lane. And we have a dismissal process, which we'll talk about in a second, where kids are dismissed, pickups by bus, then walkers. So we make sure that kids are being dismissed in a safe manner as well. It's very, very important that we follow these procedures. We do have security personnel and staff members that are out there in the morning to make sure that these procedures and guidelines are being followed. It's very, very, very important. Okay? We go to the next slide, Ms. Knapp. Again, we talk about a typical day in the student's life. Again, we talked about, say, Johnny, who was on the bus stop with his mask. Johnny got on the bus with his mask, walked all the way to the end, the back of the bus. The bus is now parked in front of Ponus. Johnny will be the last one off of the bus. And we have 3 separate entrances, because if you didn't know, Ponus is separated into 3 different houses. We have a Yale house, a Harvard house, and a Princeton house. So because of COVID-19, the way you want to keep our students cohorted by house and by grade, we want to make sure that all students are entering the building through 3 separate areas. So if you're a Yale house student, you're going to go through our auditorium door. So if you're standing in front of Ponus Ridge Middle School, the auditorium door is the door that's farthest to the left of our building. Okay? If you are a Harvard house student, you're going to enter into the main entrance of our building, which is smack dab in the middle. Okay? Smack dab in the middle of our building. If you're a Princeton house student, You're going to enter our building right next to the steam entrance. There's a small driveway called our delivery driveway. There's a back door entrance that you go through and walk up a main hallway, and that will be the place where Princeton students enter the building. I know I sent an email to all sixth grade students and families on Friday evening, telling them their homeroom, their house, and their homeroom teacher, as well as a couple things about their homeroom teacher. I'm sure everyone received that email. So please make sure you look at what house your student is in and which way that they'll be entering the building as well as exiting the building. Okay, our entrances is just the reverse of our exit and vice versa. You're going to go into the same entrance and exit the same place. We will have signage available outside of the three entrances: Yale House entrance, Princeton House entrance, Harvard House entrance. We'll also have staff members at each of those entrances, A, for the screener, and 2, for B, and for supervision as well, for students coming into the building. It's very, very important that students aren't commingling and they're going into the said entrances and leaving the building in the same manner. Okay, very important. We also have assigned stairwells and stairways. Okay. Yale, as I said, will go up the auditorium door. They'll go up our back stairwell near room 202, where they'll come on at the top of 202. Our Harvard students will come, as noted, into the middle stairwell, and they'll go to the top of the stairs, and then they'll take a left, because the Harvard house is upstairs to the left, and our Princeton students, as noted, will come in through the side door and continue straight down that long hallway and take a right at the end of it into Princeton house. So our three houses will be separated into our entire learning community. So it works out well that we have the three houses and we have the three entrances, and we have three separate parts of the building for our houses to accommodate all of our students at Ponus Ridge Middle School. Can we go to the next slide, Ms. Knapp? Thank you. We talked about bathrooms because of the coronavirus and what we have to do in terms of restrooms and keeping students separate. We have assigned bathrooms. There will also be signage on top of the bathrooms, which we're working on currently, because certain bathrooms will only be used by certain houses in our building. We're fortunate to have some bathrooms, all of our bathrooms be redone. So that'll be very nice. And we are going to have signage up where the bathrooms are, which houses can use the bathroom, where the entrances and exits are for each house. That will all be taken care of before we start school on September 1st. As noted, our bathrooms will be cleaned throughout the day, a minimum of 2 times. So that's going to be very, very important. We want you to know that we want our students and obviously your children to come to a safe and clean environment, and just let you know that we are doing everything in accordance with central office. Again, they've been fantastic and following the local guidelines to make sure that we're doing everything we can to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 in our world today. Ms. Knapp, can I have the next slide? Thank you. Breakfast and lunch, which everyone loves, and recess. We have it set up. Again, we're fortunate enough to have 3 separate areas of the building, and we will have access to a minimum of 3 breakfast and lunch carts in our building. So each house for breakfast will have their own lunch cart. So as Yale walks up that back stairwell, there'll be a breakfast cart right there for Yale students. They can choose to grab breakfast off of the cart, proceed to their homeroom in that hallway, and eat breakfast right there in their homeroom. The Harvard students will walk up the middle stairwell, and they'll have a breakfast cart right at the top of the stairwell before they take that left to go into the Harvard house, and they eat breakfast in their homeroom. And the Princeton students, as noted, will come in through the side door, and they'll have a breakfast cart at the top of their hallway on the first floor before they proceed to their homeroom to eat breakfast. It's something totally different. It's our new normal. Again, this is what school's going to look like this year. It's going to be a little bit different than what we're used to, but we are trying to acclimate as many staff and students and families to this new 2021 school year as possible. And we're going to follow the same type of procedure for lunch. Students will eat lunch in their In their classrooms as well, we will have, again, the use of 3 carts. And because the way our schedule works at Ponus Ridge, our houses eat at different times during the day. So we'll probably have access to all 3 carts in one house as well, so we can service those 9 classrooms in a much more efficient manner. That's going to be very important. That's how we set our schedule up. So all of our houses are eating at different times, so we can really be efficient in how we're serving students. And we also want to get students outside for recess as well. Recess, as you know, if you've driven by Ponus Ridge, we have a very large field in the front of our building, and we use that field, and we're going to designate spots on that field for, say, grade 6 Yale, grade 6 Harvard, grade 7 Princeton, and that's going to be your area, your child's area, when they go outside for recess. Okay, it's going to be very, very important that while we're outside for recess, that students are still practicing social distancing. There are no balls outside for recess. There's no tag. There's no, obviously, touching of one another. We will have staff members outside monitoring that recess area. Now, keep in mind, remember, when we go back to our teaching and learning environment, that we are reduced by 50% capacity. That's an important idea to keep in your head. So like I said, on our roster now, we have 665 students. That's going to be reduced drastically. And per contract, our middle school teachers can only have up to 28 students in their classroom at once. So you take half of that, that's 14. That will be the maximum amount of students in the classroom. So students, again, will have their masks on, they'll be socially distanced, and they'll be doing all the things that the teachers and administration are helping them get along with in this new normal. Okay, that's very, very important to know. Our classroom structure, back again, we talk about the teaching and learning environment, which is the core of why we obviously come to school. But I always say something at Ponus Ridge, and this has been our mantra for the last couple of years, and it's especially, I'm really going to emphasize it this year. I always talk about building relationships before content. And I don't say relationships instead of content. Content is very, very important. Very, very important. But in this time, as I started with the introduction of COVID-19, the unrest that we're going through in our country now, with all the things that are going on with protests and things of that nature, and, you know, quite honestly, our staff hasn't seen students since March 13th. And you guys haven't been in school since March 13th. So we're really going to put a large emphasis on relationship building, on a social, emotional, and academic learning aspect for students, to make sure that they're comfortable, to make sure that you're comfortable sending your students to our building on a basis where they can come home and say, you know what, I had a really good day at Ponus Ridge. I like my teachers, and I can't wait to go back the next day. That's very, very important. I wanted to preface that before I talked about our classroom setup. And please know that, you know, that we have 4 middle schools in Norwalk, and everyone's model may be a little bit different. We've designed a model that meets the needs of our building and our students and our families based on what we've seen. Again, I've been at Ponus, this will be year 11. Ms. Knapp has been in maybe over 15 years, and Mr. Byron was new to the building last year, but he has lots of experience in the Norwalk public school system. Our classroom setup, again, it's going to be at 50% capacity. So again, take that 28, maybe cut it in half to 14. And if a teacher has 16 kids in a class, there may be 8 kids in the class. So just keep that in mind. All of our core subject area classrooms are going to be in use at Ponus Ridge. Okay? They're going to be in use at Ponus Ridge, meaning our core subject areas are English, our math, our science, and our social studies classes. Core areas will be in use at Ponus Ridge. And what we're going to do after the student gets off the bus, presents his screener, right? A day in the life of, presents his screener. He's okay. He goes up the Yale stairwell. He grabs his breakfast off the cart. He goes into his homeroom, eats his breakfast. The room is cleaned. The bell is going to ring. That student is going to go right to his next class, which is the way we set up our building. Our classes are either right next to one another or right across the hall from one another, okay? Very, very important in our physical setup in our building that that student will leave their homeroom and either take 3 steps across the hall to their ELA class or possibly 2 steps to the right or left to their math class, okay? And they will switch during their core classes. So we are not going to keep students, again, we're not going to keep students in the classroom for 6.5, 7 hours a day in one classroom and funnel adults into that classroom. We've trusted our plan enough that we're going to have students travel to their core area subjects, either again, right next to one another or right across the hall so they can make sure that they're trying to have, we want to give them the safest and the best middle school student experience in light of what's going on around us in our society. And having our kids travel in that small cohort by house and by grade optimizes our model the best we possibly can. We do have some students that are in accelerated math, and they will go to their accelerated math classes, and some social studies teachers will also go, a social studies teacher will also may have a class with students from multiple grades and houses. They will also be in use. But again, we are trying our absolute best to mitigate the spread of COVID-19, and I've said it, a few times because it's a real thing. It's real, okay? We're trying our best to mitigate it, to make sure students are safe, first and foremost, and 2, they're also receiving a robust educational experience at 21 Hunters Lane. That's very, very important. Again, it goes back to that joint responsibility I talked about in the introduction, the mask wearing, constant hand washing, the constant repetition of the message that we're sending at school that has to continue at home. You'll see in my emails that I always write that this is a learning community and that education doesn't stop at 2:35. We highly encourage you to ask your children when they come home, how was school? How was school? What'd you do in school? This and that. We want that to happen because that helps us, and you give us that feedback. That helps us to grow as a learning environment. Okay, it helps our staff. It helps our administrators assess what we're doing and constantly reassess and evaluate things in which we can do better things to best serve our community. Very, very important. Again, it's a joint responsibility. It doesn't stop at 2:35, and especially in the time we're in now, we really need your support in what we're doing in our building at 21 Hunters Lane. Ms. Knapp, can you, I'm sorry, you can stay on that slide. You can go back, Ms. Knapp, I'm sorry. The related arts teachers for 6th grade students and 6th grade families. Our related arts teachers are, another word is our elective teachers. That's your world language, your art, your technology education, your PE, your music, your band, your orchestra, all those things that don't fall under math, ELA, science, and social studies are related arts. Now, what's different about our schedule, and Ms. Knapp will get to our schedule in a second. What's different about our schedule for the 2020-21 school year is our related arts teachers will travel to classrooms to teach virtually. So when Johnny has related arts, I'm going back to the day in the life of Johnny. When Johnny has his related arts class, Johnny is going to go back to his homeroom, and this will be clearly lined out for your students. Please, they're not going to have to figure it out on their own. We will tell them exactly what to do and exactly where to go. Johnny goes back to his related arts, to his homeroom for his related arts class. Our related arts teacher will come to that homeroom with, say, 14 students. The 14 students in that classroom, may be on all different related arts Google Classrooms virtually. So Johnny may be in art class virtually, but someone 6 feet from Johnny may be in tech ed virtually. Another student may be in PE virtually. Another student in that homeroom may be in world language virtually. That is the best time, that is the best plan that we have in mind for all of our students. Again, trying our absolute best to mitigate the spread of this of COVID-19 and making sure kids are safe, but also getting what they need from an educational standpoint and from an equity standpoint. We do not want to leave anyone out. Let me rephrase that. We won't leave anyone out. That is our goal and our obligation as educators. Again, the mantra always is we want to stress relationships before content. That's a definite. Okay, relationships before content, especially in this time, but we also do not want to shortchange the promise that we made to students and families about what we can deliver at 21 Hunters Lane. Okay, very, very important. Okay, can we go to the next slide, Ms. Snap? Thank you. This is a picture of our regular day schedule. Just take 2 seconds to look at it. I know it looks overwhelming. And I see Mr. Byron, you're smiling. I know it looks overwhelming. If you are a Harvard family, that's what the Harvard schedule will look like, to the far left. If you're a Princeton family, that's your schedule right in the middle. If you're a Yale family, that's your schedule to the far right. Mr. Byron, Ms. Knapp, and myself know exactly what these things are. At this time, we know what core is, passing time, and all the things that are listed. Mr. Byron, do you want to take a couple seconds to talk through the schedule, please?
Yes, I do. So just to put a few things in context, especially related to what Dr. Lewis just relayed, and this is especially significant for the 6th grade families that are just entering middle school in Newark Public Schools and Ponus Ridge in particular. Our middle schools run on a house structure, right? So students enter 6th grade in a house, and in order to build those relationships and part of that social emotional dynamic and what's developmentally appropriate, they stay in that house through 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, whether that be Harvard, Princeton, or Yale. Within those houses, there is a collection of teachers that teach the core courses, social studies, science, ELA, and math for the students in that house. As Dr. Lewis alluded to, those cohorts are moving in this COVID-19 environment within their grade, within that house. That's how it is defined. When we do move out of an eventual COVID environment, though, in the years to come, they are still in that house, right? And most of their core classes are with those grade and house students. The major differential at this point is with those related art courses, which you'll see kind of in the light blue on the screen right now, if you can see the screen in front of you. Usually students would travel to their related arts teachers. Our related arts staff teaches across multiple grades and across multiple houses on a daily basis. And in some courses, depending on what they are teaching multiple grades at the same time within a house. Obviously, as it relates to our public health and safety needs at this time, that is a level of risk in terms of multiple grades and multiple houses going consistently into the same area that we need to mitigate, and is not a risk that we want to take. And so we still want to be sure that our students have access to the related arts they have chosen and are not dictated to a specific related art only because of the homeroom they're in. And so in order to do that, our students will travel back to their homeroom, but get the support for their specifically scheduled related art that was in their schedule to begin with during those related art blocked times. And they will get that support either synchronously online, Google Classroom, and using a lot of the tools that have been made available to us as a public school district through the technology department, and working with our colleagues at the other middle schools within our building as well as central office. So again, for those of you that are new to the middle school, I understand that that's a lot of information, but just to give some context to the schedule that you are looking at, again, we have 3 separate houses. Within that house, students cohort, with the exception of accelerated math, will be within that core house and grade level in order to avoid the risk that comes along with students traveling across multiple grades and multiple houses every day with related arts. They will go back to that homeroom that is based already in their grade and house combination cohort and access the related arts that they are scheduled for and they chose as part of the scheduling process in those rooms. And we're continuing to work with our curriculum and instruction department, as well as have our teachers move through professional learning in order to help implement that curriculum as much as functionally possible given the environment. I know that there have been some questions that have popped up around music and other things. I want to make sure we get through the core content, as obviously we know there are families around dinner time that have other obligations. So we want to make sure we get through the core content of our slideshow here, and then we will open it up to questions at the end, and I will pop back to some of those prompts related to music and other things. A reminder that we are recording this so that if you do need to jump off at any time, if you feel you have the information you need at this moment and want to circle back, there will be a link that is sent out so you can access this information and those questions at a different time. So if you do need to log off for any reason, I want to make sure that we reiterate you will have access to this information.
Thank you, Mr. Byron. Ms. Knapp, can you go to the next slide? I did see a question about our after-school program. We do have a couple of after-school programs. We have our Carver program, which is facilitated by the Carver Center, but it happens at Ponus Ridge Middle School. Because of COVID-19, we have to limit the number of students in the program per space in the after-school program, and that's 10 to 12 students. So we will have an after-school program, but the number of students is limited to 10 to 12 in one particular space. Okay, it's also a fact that we have the Ponus After School Club as well in sports. Again, those limited to 10 to 12 students. And it's important to know that the students that are in the building on that day can only access are the only ones that can access the after school program if you're in the building on that day. Okay, we have to always follow the guidelines set forth by the health department and the CDC for social distancing regarding extracurricular activities. Again, we want to provide as much of a middle school experience as possible, but acting in certain parameters so we keep everyone's safety at the forefront of what we're doing. So we do have after school programs at Ponus Ridge. Ms. Knapp, can you go to the next one? I did share in one of my emails to 6th grade families and 7th and 8th grade families that Jefferson Elementary School will be housed at Ponus Ridge Middle School. And if you've gone into Ponus, you'll see the word STEAM emblazoned upon one of the buildings. Jefferson will take place. Their educational environment will be in that new STEAM building. We will use a small portion of that STEAM building for one of our houses, but 95% of the classrooms in that STEAM building will be used by Jefferson. There are separate restrooms for Jefferson students, separate restrooms for Ponus students. So we, again, obviously want to mitigate the risk of an older student with a younger student. So please know that Jefferson will be in our building, in part of our building, for a minimum of 2 years, possibly 3, while their building is being worked on at their old site, okay? And some of our classrooms at Ponus, some of our non-traditional classrooms will be used by Jefferson. Say our gym, our cafeteria, since no one's eating in the cafeteria and students will be eating lunch in their classrooms, Jefferson will use that space to practice the social distancing and to keep kids safe. So there's, again, a lot of changes going into our plan and what we've done. And we're in a unique situation in other buildings in the district because we have another school that's living with us on our campus. And we've been working since December, January with Jefferson about having a schedule and sharing spaces, and COVID-19 just added another layer to it. So we just dug a little bit deeper and we found spaces. So we are going to coexist in that space of 2100 Lane. Again, the elementary school students will be in the STEAM building, and we will be in our newly renovated building to mitigate any kind of spread or cross contamination along those lines. Okay, very important. Ms. Knapp? If I talked about earlier in the introduction, how schools are going to look different this year. I think we outlined that pretty well, what it's going to look like. What we've done as a district and as a school to ensure that students are A, safe, and B, getting the most rigorous program that we're going to promise to families. The student schedule, understanding the schedule, I know we talked through it. I'm sure there'll be questions about it because it's new to a lot of people. And again, just going back to that joint responsibility about what has to happen, not only in our building, but also at home and in our community to make sure we're not losing more people to this this infectious disease. What's up on the screen now is if you have questions or particular point people in the building, anything about health and safety, which I'm sure a lot of families may have a question about, or those grade 7 families about physicals. Jennifer Wallinson is our school nurse. Jennifer is fantastic, to say the least. Our scheduling guru is Mr. Byron, who you heard from earlier. He's amazing, to say the least. We really work really collaboratively to make sure we're working to maximize, student outcomes and everything that we can do. The woman who I'm alluding to behind the scenes, Miss Knapp, is our Dean of Students, and she's working the PowerPoint and the screen. So Miss Knapp is another part of our administrative team. We also have what we call vertical house leaders. They're like pseudo administrators, and each house, Harvard, Yale, and Princeton, has a vertical house leader, and they answer a lot of questions that don't make it to the administrative level. They handle those things in-house with parent-teacher meetings, along with counselors and so on and so forth. Okay, we do want to leave some time for questions. It is right now 6:45, and I've probably talked too much. I do apologize. But we did have a lot of information to give you. Right now, we are still under construction at Ponus Ridge. We're hoping to get access to our building the end of this week, hopefully, because we have things to get done. Staff, they have to unpack their rooms, and we have to unpack our offices, because what you don't know is in the beginning of January, when we had break, we had to move everyone out of our renovated building into the STEAM building so they could work on our now renovated building. Now we're going back. So it's been a lot of moving. It's been a lot of moving back and forth. So we're going to be happy to be back in one place to call it our home. So before we start to entertain some questions, we want to get to as many questions as possible, if not all of them. Again, if I don't get the chance, I want to thank everyone who's logged in tonight and watched this presentation about Ponus Ridge Middle School, our reopening plan, what our plan looks like, how the school year is going to be a little bit different, what we've done in terms of a district and a school to put health and safety practices and protocols into place. The schedule that we talked about, the joint responsibility, again, I can't emphasize it enough. What teaching and learning will look like, the hybrid model, how we're going to mitigate the spread with the cohorting, the constant hand washing, how we respond to potential cases with isolation rooms, and so on and so forth. So we did cover a lot tonight. I know you may be overwhelmed. Trust us, we get the feeling, we know, but this is what we do. This is what we signed up for. So we're going to go to some questions right now. And again, thank you for joining us tonight. You have our emails, Louis D. at norwalkps.org, Byron E. at norwalkps.org, and Knapp, K-N-A-P-P-E, at norwalkps.org. Mr. Byron, can you answer that? Can we go to that first question about distance learners?
Yeah, so as I've got a bunch of questions rolling in here, I have seen them, but I wanted to make sure we got through the information. Like I said on the front end, we are recording this. So if for any reason, additional familial obligations, either at this point or at any point in the next 15, 20 minutes or so as we go through questions, if that pulls you away, you'll always be able to access this online at the link. So just know that if you need to log off for any reason. So a few major things I saw, big ticket items that we will talk through as major themes, and obviously we'll keep an eye on additional questions as they come in. And like Dr. Lewis said, with those email addresses, you can send us questions as well, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. In terms of the hybrid model, which came up a couple times, as well as who is A, who is B. We were working with our colleagues at the other middle schools in central office around protocols to make that determination about who is in the first or A group and who is in the second or B group in terms of what days you come to school in the hybrid model. Now that we have kind of finalized those protocols with our colleagues at the other middle schools in central office, that is our next major charge. And we'll be looking to set up those lists and send them out as soon as possible. Again, we do encourage If there is anyone you know who has not filled out that form and families that haven't, those groupings are only as strong as we have responses from families in terms of what option they are choosing. So if you have not done that, please make sure you do so. Dr. Lewis has been sending out that link pretty regularly. If you've unsubscribed from the Norwalk Public Schools by any chance at one point, please look into that and make sure. Sometimes people do that by accident in second, third, fourth grade, and then they won't get the email. So check your spam folders, trash folders, and things like that. So hybrid model will be either your group 1 or A group, or your group 2 or B group. Information as to which group your student is in should come out as we enter the end of this week, maybe as early as the beginning of next week. Again, if we have to shift things around relative to parents and families filling that information and the information coming in appropriately. In terms of after school at Ponus, Dr. Lewis spoke briefly about the Carver program. There is information about the Carver program as well on the Ponus Ridge PTO page. And our staff that work the Carver program do give out forms for applications and the process and funding and how all that works right at the beginning of the school year. In terms of a 6th grade orientation, we do have plans for a 6th grade orientation to engage with parents. We're also exploring avenues in terms of putting information or videos together, in terms of key faces, administrators, vertical house leaders, key information that we will put out to the community so that they can access information. We're trying to see once we can get back into the building. Again, some of this will be time dependent if we can do some video for what the building looks like so that students can visualize and know ahead of time the physical space they're walking into and kind of see that. So that's what that will look like. Usually we have a 6th grade orientation where 6th graders and families can come. Obviously, both because of construction and our COVID situation, we are not able to have a large scale in-person 6th grade orientation. In terms of construction, once we move into the school year, construction happens after hours. Construction will not be going on during the school day. There will be construction crews that do remain on the campus at their trailer kind of off-site. They're there always to kind of help support us if things come up from a structural level or lighting or things like that that come as you near the end of a construction project and kind of exterior planning. So students may see construction members on site. All those construction members wear masks. They are COVID tested as part of their protocols for even being allowed on the work site, but there isn't active instruction that will be going on during the day. There will be signs as well. And again, I'm just kind of quickly streamlining through multiple big things that came up. So I apologize if I'm going quickly. There will be signage at the house entrances out the outside of the building. There will be staff, administrative and certified staff on duty at those entrances, both in terms of making sure we understand what's going on with the screening process for students, with those health screenings we discussed, as well as general safety and check-in and welcoming and hello. There are staff that are assigned to that, and myself, Dr. Lewis, and Ms. Knapp are assigned to each one of the houses in those entrances. If we're not in the building for whatever reason on any given day, our vertical house leaders will be there to help support that. An email did go out, as Dr. Lewis referred to. We did build all the 6th grade homerooms. You should have gotten an email about the homeroom and homeroom number and the house associated with it. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns about that, or didn't get that information, please make sure to check your email again in case you unsubscribed, or you can reach out to us in particular. If you feel
Mr. Byron, it went to student emails as well.
Yes, it did go to student emails as well. So if your students are able to log in, or have accessed their email before, they can do so. I had a couple people who said they don't think their email was on the email blast. Sometimes that's actually a function of what you listed as Guardian Email 1, which is what School Messenger and Power School pulls from to send that email out. If that is the case and you are concerned, please email myself. That is Byron E, B-Y-R-O-N-E at norwalkps.org. Dr. Lewis, which is Lewis D, L-E-W-I-S-D at norwalkps.org. And Miss Yvonne Rodriguez, who helps us manage that information. That's Rodriguez, Y, R-O-D-R-I-G-U-E-Z-Y at norwalkps.org. Okay, so those are the emails you would want to send that to so we can get you all situated. I had a question. I believe that they can, Dr. Lewis, correct me if I'm wrong, if students are still allowed to bring their own lunch.
Yes,
They
correct.
should,
Yes,
correct. They should, you're still
absolutely.
able and allowed to do that. We got a couple questions about lockers. Students will have their backpacks with them. We will not be using lockers, at least in the short term. It's too many students located very close to another and moving in and out of the hallway for public health and safety reasons. We want to avoid that if at all possible. Students usually get their schedules on the first day of school in homeroom. I know that usually with elementary teachers, their assignment for which teacher they have usually goes out earlier. But our students working with their house leaders and homeroom teachers, we kind of do that work on the front end to explain the schedule to them and walk them through that and what that schedule looks like. Students at this point should be one-to-one. They have their own computers. I believe those students who were fifth graders are bringing their computers with them, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
In terms of, there was a couple questions about safety. Yes, there will be multiple entrances and staff and administrators monitoring them, but that's upon entry and exit, which is normal for a school day anyway. We're just being a lot more explicit and deliberate about which houses are entering in which locations and how they are doing so. So we will still have our one entry point to the Jefferson main office and our one entry point during the Ponus main office for safety reasons once we get the school day going, just so you are aware of that. A couple questions about band and music. We're trying to figure out how that's going to function. Again, music in general can be risky in terms of spread of COVID. You're blowing air into an instrument or singing. So music in general has been a concern. We're working about how we can get students still within that cohort, right? So students in band or students with orchestra that are within that grade 6 Harvard cohort or within that grade 7 Yale cohort to have time that they're pulled out into lessons. And again, because they are already scheduled in related arts by house, we should be able to set up a schedule. We're working with our music department to do so those students can get pulled out to do that work. In terms of a couple things came up with medical concerns, insulin, diabetes, and snack and lunchtime. Our school nurse, like Dr. Lewis said, is phenomenal. She is on top of everything in terms of medication and those medical needs. So she will touch base with those students very early on in the school year and whatever their needs are. If you have concerns, please reach out to her so that she's aware. Again, that's Jen Rollinson, Rollinson J, ROLINSONJ at norwalkps.org. In terms of students who are in distance learning full-time, we are working with our curriculum and instruction office, and there will be professional learning time to help our teachers make that work. They will be live streaming that instruction. That is the plan at this time. So students that are distance learning have access in real time to the same instruction that is going on for students in the classroom. There has been a couple questions about walking. My understanding is the protocol still exists that if you are less than a mile from school and you're not able to drop off, students absolutely can walk to school. There was a question, are kids allowed to? My understanding is at this time, those students still are allowed to walk to school if that is something that you are comfortable with. Again, in terms of signing up for the after school program, there is information online on the the Ponus PTO page for Carver, and there will be information given out to parents at the beginning of the year. In terms of electing related arts classes, a couple of that came up. Your students chose that in 5th grade. Our counselors went down and worked with Fox Run, Jefferson, and Kendall, and information was given to principals in other middle schools that may have been, say, in Columbus or another, or Rowayton, and for some reason are coming to Ponus for curricular or programmatic reasons. They went through that process. Our school counselors have gone through all those schedules for those students and have them set up. A lot of 6th graders do kind of have a full cadre of courses. We like to expose them to as much as possible while making sure that we hit all those marks in terms of music and world language. But they can kind of get a little deeper and more specific as time goes on, but those major things they should have in their schedule. We do have some questions around drop-off that I'll start to answer, and if Dr. Lewis takes over so I can kind of push through to some of these other questions in a second. Around, we do have different drop-off times. Jefferson does enter 15 minutes before us. They'll drop off at the STEAM building area. Our students will need to line up at those entrances that we spoke about, but because we have 4 separate entrances and different drop-off times, we do feel pretty good about that. Dr. Lewis, if you want to allude to anything else while I kind of look through what I need to catch.
Sure, no problem. Jefferson, is, as Mr. Byron alluded to, they're going to have actually 2 entrances. They're going to go into the STEAM entrance through their front door, and they also have a side door that's next to their next to the playground. So they're going to go in through those doors, and they're going to be separate from the Ponus entrances. Again, there's a 15-minute buffer for entrance and exit, so we feel pretty good about that in terms of how kids are entering the building and they're not commingling.
Again, a few more questions about schedules in AB. Like I said, we've been really trying to finalize with our colleagues at middle school and central office and make sure we have a good handle on how we want to group and make sure that our SPED students, our EL students, our overall Ponus population get the services that they need, and we work accordingly through that. So we'll be working to get those groups out to you as soon as possible over the next week or 2, but certainly you will have it in enough time before we enter the school year. Again, students will get their schedules as they come into homeroom. The model as it stands right now, and I believe that this was discussed at a district level for middle schools, and there's a calendar that we'll be able to give you, goes, I think it's AA, and then BBB, BB, and what ends up happening after that first stagger with those first few A days is there are 5 consecutive school days that a particular group is in the building. So say that a group starts on a Thursday, okay, let's call it group B, then they would be in Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, right? If you have something like Labor Day, they'd be in Thursday, Friday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then the next group would take over, okay? So we have that consecutive schedule. Again, once we have the groupings out, you will get more specific scheduling in terms of what group your students in and which specific calendar days they are coming in as a result. We should note that within your student's schedule, their actual scheduling has A day and B day courses that is separate from the groups they are in. We know that can be a little bit confusing or complex. You could even think of group A as group 1 and group B as group 2, but just so your students know when they come into the building, they will have an A day and B day schedule itself. And that goes for all their years at Ponus Ridge, just so they have access to their related arts. We start the school day, we let students in at 8 o'clock. Parents come in and kind of drop students off at 7:45, 7:50 range. There are staff and administrators out there monitoring. They will just need to go and make sure they line up accordingly. In terms of free and reduced lunch and breakfast, we're in the process, as has been made public in board meetings, of Ponus Ridge to try and be 100% free and reduced lunch and breakfast so that we don't need to worry about kind of meal payments and things like that and lunch balances. As that information comes in, we will make sure to clarify that with you. I've answered a few questions on the AB groups and placements, the rotation, when will students get their schedule. If you need to drop your student off, you can do so. They still have access to the bus. We do have some students that are dropped off and then take the bus in the afternoon. That's fine.
One caveat. Sorry, Mr. Byron.
Yep.
If you do, and this has been, again, this is year 11 for me. If you do drop your student off in the morning, please make sure that your student knows which bus number that they are taking home, because we run into that every year. The family, and I understand, the family would drop the student off at the beginning of the day and tell the child, okay, take the bus home, and the child has no idea what bus they're taking, what stop they're getting off, or anything of the above. So please make sure if you do drop off in the morning that they know the bus number and where they get off for the afternoon run.
Again, a lot of questions on Group A, Group B. Again, those structures are being finalized. Once that goes out to you, you will have both what group your student is in, and there will be a calendar that tells you which group is in the building on that day. And again, I must reiterate, that will be separate from the type of schedule that they follow once they're in the building, if they're in the building that day. But we will work that through with students. Again, the primary is what group are they in? That information will come out to you, as well as which group is in the building what day. That information will come out to you as well. I know that's a lot of people's questions, and we're just kind of at the point where we're trying to make that charge to get those groups for you. In terms of movement, it is our recommendation that if you are doing remote or distance learning, that you make the decision potentially to wait until the quarter switches to bring your student back to school. That is our recommendation in order for it to kind of be clean, both for your student to be prepared by kind of the natural shift in that, as well as to make sure that we are prepared for your student to enter accordingly. If you need to go from that remote distance learning to in-person learning, that's information that needs to come to us as soon as possible, and with whatever the plan is in terms of that entry when you intend for that student to enter. But again, it is our high recommendation that you wait for the quarter to shift for your student to make that acclimation back if you've decided to start in distance learning, just so you have all the information that you need, or at least give some substantial amount of time to prepare the student and make sure they have all they need accordingly to come in. If students forget their health assessment or that is not filled in, they're going to need to go to the nurse to fill in that health assessment, and it's possible that a parent or a guardian may need to be called if there's any follow-up information that needs to be sought out at that point. Though, and again, Ms. Knapp did put those emails out again for everyone with spelling if you want to look in the group chat so that you are aware. Students can bring their own lunch. Your students did elect what language they chose back in 5th grade. What 6th graders should bring on day one, our houses are putting together supply lists so that they can give that information to families in terms of what is needed. Obviously, you want to make sure you have that Chromebook and charger and it is good and charged up. Other things like notebooks, binders, paper, pen, or pencil are just good standard items for a student to have with their backpack so that at any given moment they can access materials that they need. Any additional things or specific things will be relayed to them once they enter the school year. Any other things you want to allude on or bring up, Dr. Lewis? Again,
I just saw a couple questions about transitioning from hybrid to remote and remote to hybrid. I mean, it all starts with contacting building administration, whichever way you want to go. If you want to start hybrid, you have to start with the administration. And as Mr. Byron alluded to, we highly recommend and suggest that if you're going to go from full remote to hybrid, that to make it clean for everyone involved, the transportation department, the teachers in the building, your child, that we do that at the end of a quarter. I saw one question on when does the quarter end. First quarter ends around the end of November. Am I right, Mr. Byron? I don't know the exact date off the top of my head.
Usually very close to Election Day.
Yeah.
1 or 2 days on either end.
Yeah. We answer questions about lunch. Yes, you can bring your own lunch. We answer questions about the groups, the district calendar that's coming out. I'm trying to think about the categories. Chromebook, I saw some families said that they didn't get a Chromebook in elementary school. We do have some Chromebooks at Ponus that we can assign. Am I right, Mr. Byron?
We should have some additional Chromebooks that have come back into us. But again, we cannot stress enough, it is important that your child keeps that Chromebook in their care. It's important piece of equipment, and it's a good lesson for them at this point in their developmental stage in
Mhm.
terms of the price of equipment like that and how important it is for the schools and by extension the city and taxpayers that money be used appropriately and that they handle those Chromebooks or their computers with care. We want to make sure that we instill that lesson with them, and it goes to what Dr. Lewis spoke about at the beginning about both that school and home relationship
Yes.
as we kind of make that happen or make that work. In terms of cleaning, if I've got a sixth grade Harvard class that's going into another room where there was a sixth grade Harvard class, that is defined as their cohort, right? And that aligns with all of our public and health and safety requirements from both the state, federal, and district level in terms of cohorting and being kind of explicit about that. We understand if people aren't comfortable with that for particular health reasons or things like that, and they've chosen the hybrid model as a result, we understand that, but we're being, and we want to make sure we're fully transparent about our cohorting definition, and that will be very clear in our opening plan as well, that we are defining those cohorts as the grade and house. So sixth grade Harvard is a cohort, and they should be expected to interact with each other on the days they are in the building as a cohort.
Remember, families, it's 50% capacity. I have to keep going back to that, right? It's 50% capacity.
In terms of when they apply for the after school program, again, that information is on the PTO page. And again, that information usually goes out very quickly in homerooms from the staff that supports it. Again, be sure to join the Ponus Ridge Middle School PTO page. Thank you, Melissa.
Yes.
That's absolutely correct. Trying to see, a lot of this is other information. In terms of snow days, we will cross that bridge when we get there. That's a decision that district is trying to make a determination on. We appreciate the thanks and that people feel this was informative. Again, we're trying to make that balance between the health and safety of your students as well as trying to offer them the best educational program we can during this time. So we have put a lot of hard work and long hours and planning into this, and we will continue to do so and adjust as we see fit. Distance learning, for those, is a great question. For those people that are on remote, it is a full school day, right? So it is not like it was in the spring. For those people that were in distance learning, that it was 8 to 12, they are expected to follow their exact schedule with those times that the schedule is designated. So if they're in Yale, they follow that Yale schedule, and they are with that class during those times. And teachers will reach out to their students with Google Classroom and those other codes, and to those student emails. Again, we cannot stress enough for students to log in and interact with that student email to get that information so they know what their classes are and how to access it. I know we answered a lot of questions about in-person to distance. Eighth grade homeroom assignments, they are in the exact homeroom that they were in last year. Once they enter that homeroom, that's the homeroom they stay in. If there is a student that is completely new to the district, they're allocated a homeroom, and we will work with them upon entry to kind of get them situated. We talked about when they get their schedules, lunch payment, choose lunch, again, more lunch. Again, desks being cleaned between classes. If I'm a sixth grade Harvard student going into another sixth grade Harvard student classroom and work like that, they are defined as a cohort. We're continuing to work with staff, both custodial and certified, about what it is we can do, if anything, to clean as much as we can. Again, we cannot eliminate all risk, but we're trying to mitigate it at every possible turn. And in the situations where we feel like there is major overlap and cleaning is necessary, we will continue to troubleshoot and do that and clean accordingly to meet those health and safety protocols. Information about parent logins to monitor student online activity. In terms of Power School, there is a parent access point, and there's information that counselors can give out in terms of how parents can access their students' Power School, and kind of have that information. There will not be parents logging in with their students to classrooms to monitor if their kid's in that room while they're at work. Again, we do have to make sure we're clear on the bandwidth and making sure we use every little inch that we have to make sure that students are engaged and interact accordingly. In terms of those that are remote learning, those students will have access, like we're saying, to live streaming to the classroom, and they'll make that work happen. IEP services and distance learning, there are certain students in the special education department will be reaching out to you accordingly that will be allowed to be in school 5 days a week if they meet certain protocols. And if they do that, you can elect for that. In terms of fully remote, if you select that, they will still have things like co-teaching and those services that are in that IEP. And again, we fully understand that you need to choose for your students what is best for them, both in terms of education and health, and the fact that that needs to be balanced. Those teachers will interact with students as much as possible with that streaming, and we will do the best we can with that. In terms of your students cannot go on the bus in the morning if they do not qualify for transportation. You need to find out with the transportation office if your student qualifies for busing relative to their location and how close they are to school. Again, I know some people will pick students up from school, but if they are eligible for busing and take the bus in the morning, that's fine. But again, like Dr. Lewis said, make sure they understand their bus stop, their bus time, and their bus number. That information will come out directly from the transportation office. In terms of recess, like Dr. Lewis said, it is built into the lunch period in middle school. Once a cohort in that homeroom is done with their lunch, they will have designated time to go out for recess and potentially get mask breaks and things like that, okay? Believe it or not, that is all the questions I have caught up all the way to the end on.
Yes.
Again, we know there are 73 participants. Some people will hold back. If you have a couple more questions, this is being recorded. We will post it as well. If you're afraid you're going to miss anything, don't fear. You can always circle back to the online after the fact or to a link and see that video. We'll hold back for a few more minutes just in case. But again, we want to thank everyone for coming tonight. We know there's a lot going on in the world, in the city, and your own homes, and kind of navigating this with your children. And we kind of appreciate the time and you spending an evening with us here. So
Yes.
thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you,
We'll
Ms.
hold
Knapp.
back for a few more minutes. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate it. We see your
Thank you. We do. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You can't see me, but I'm clapping. Thank you. You're welcome. You're welcome.